Hi, I'm Sarah. Welcome to SOM Talks. I'm finally back after a much needed break, and can I say, a reset feels so good. So, in today's episode, we are joined by the amazing Matthew Harms. Matthew is a New York-based author. He is also a ghostwriter. He has his own company called Penforhirenyc. Matthew has an incredible story to share. He was not always an author. Well, not professionally, but he definitely was one in his heart and as a spirit. And he shares that in today's podcast, how his drive to follow his dream, to write, was always with him, and how it eventually pulled him out of the corporate job and got him into his own path. Matthew is authentic. He is an exceptional storyteller. So I'm so excited for you to be listening to this podcast. If you are on the fence of following your path, if you feel like your path is the one which is less traveled, if you are somebody who finds less support in their surrounding in relation to following their path, then this is your episode. I am very excited for you to hear it, to understand and learn the nuggets of wisdom that Matthew drops pretty much throughout the episode. And can I say, I have learned so much from this episode. I feel like Matthew has a way of talking where he keeps everything very straightforward, black and white. And it's through the maturation of thoughts, through his own deep thinking, that he has such clarity in what he envisions and what he thinks. And I really benefited from that, and I hope you do as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to give us a follow or subscribe to the channel. Give us a rating, a review. It's always very helpful because this channel is new. And yeah, I'll leave you to the episode now. Matthew Harms, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
Thank you for being here. So Matthew, you are a writer from New York. You also have your own business called Penforhirenyc. Quite interesting stuff. I had this conversation with you a few weeks back where you had explained that this all happened by accident. I would love to get to know you a little bit more, starting with that story.
Okay, so really, I've been writing since I was a kid. I guess we'll go back to that. But somehow I wound up on this path that others picked for me, which turned into retail financial services. And I came to a point in 2017 where I realized I absolutely hated what I was doing. I kind of knew all along I wasn't happy, but it just got to a point of pure misery. And to take my mind off of it, I got back to writing for the first time in a number of years. And I published my first book on Amazon about kind of my experiences and how I wind up where I was. Then the next year I published my second book, and that kind of gave me the confidence to finally say, you know what? I don't need to be working for this company that I hate, in this industry that I hate, with people that I hate. And I found a part-time consulting job in New York City, working with junior high school students, teaching them how to use writing as a form of social emotional learning. So basically, here's how you use writing to deal with your emotions instead of violence. And that was a significant pay cut, but the fulfillment was more than made up for any financial hardship. Then the pandemic happened, the school shut down. I was only a consultant, so I stopped getting paid. And I was fortunate enough to meet a gentleman who was already a best-selling author. His business was doing incredibly well, and he approached me when he found out that I was a writer. I had written my own books, and basically said to me, you can write books. I need a book. You're out of a job. I'm going to pay you to write my next book.
Wow.
I did not even know ghostwriting was a thing. But he explained that it's actually fairly common for professionals to hire someone to write because they're too busy or they lack the skill set. And the next thing you know, I helped him finish his book. He coached me into starting Penforhirenyc. And in the last 2 years, we've now worked with over 24 authors, business owners, anyone who's wanted to get their message out.
Wow. That's straight out of a movie.
You know, people say, what's the expression? It's going to escape me now. But I'm drawing a blank.
It's
It's
okay.
always right there on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
But it's one of those hokey expressions that I never believed in.
Mm-hmm.
But everything happens for a reason. And apparently I quit my job for a reason. The pandemic happened for a reason. And I met this gentleman for a reason. And now I get to spend every day doing what I love and helping people tell their story.
Yeah, everything does happen for a reason. And this story is quite interesting. I've never really heard something quite like this. It's one of those stories which make me wonder how many pieces are working behind the scenes when somebody really wants to fulfill their desire.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it took a lot for me to realize that I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. In fact, one of the expressions I've learned since is sometimes we don't make a change until the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change.
Yeah. It truly is. That is truly correct. I remember having this conversation with a group of people in this session, in a conversation session. It was much of a coaching session, but one of the things that has stuck with me there was a slide that I had prepared, and this never really came to me as clearly as until that point. And the slide said that you were going to stay in your comfort zone until and unless the growth pain is more than your desire of change.
Yep.
So I was like, wow, I never had that clarity. And it's funny how I'm having this clarity right now in a coaching session as I'm coaching somebody, and I have that slide prepared. So yeah, I feel like listening to your story, it is truly one of those moments where you have been in a certain path for a long time, but the desire to change overtakes the growth, the pain of growth. And that's when you started to make the change.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for I'm not going to call it bad advice, but I'll call it misguided advice from when I was younger of getting a stable job or getting a job that had a guaranteed paycheck and not being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
My family, I don't think there were any entrepreneurs short of myself. Well, now myself, my brother, like we're all first generation entrepreneurs. Everyone else had a very regimented job. My father worked at the post office for 40 something years, knew he was getting a pension, knew his medical insurance was taken care of. And that was always the advice we were given, right? Get a stable job where you know your bills are going to be paid. You can get 2-3 weeks vacation if you're lucky, and you may have a retirement plan when you get older. Now, by the time that happened to me, companies weren't even giving pensions anymore. So it was either go to college or become a cop or a fireman.
Yeah, it's really that situation. And when your father has been in a job for 40 years, obviously his mindset is conventional. He's obviously looking for security, and that is something that he would want from his kids as well. Being one of those kids, how did that feel? Did that feel like security, or did that feel like lack of freedom?
It definitely felt like lack of freedom. Looking at his situation, I could see where it made sense or why he did what he did. But for me, so much had changed from the time he made his career decision to when I was in high school or going to college, that those learnings or that advice I didn't feel was really relevant. And I wound up trading my desire or my freedom for what I like to call golden handcuffs.
Golden handcuffs. Nice.
Yeah. Paycheck was guaranteed. I knew what I was going to get.
Yeah.
Every couple months you get a raise. But it was just enough to keep you coming back.
Yeah. So when you're talking about this time in your life, it is quite difficult to break away from something like this because your entire family is counting on your dad's paycheck or that, that stable job. Was your mom working at that time?
My mom was working when we were very little. By the time I was in high school, she was fully diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and was no longer able to work.
So that just makes the situation a little bit more complicated, because now you have your mom who you also have to care for. And the family dynamic is as such that there are really less opportunities for risks. This is something I experienced when my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And for some time, he had to stop working. And obviously, he had a good paying job, the 9 to 5, which was taking care of him a little bit. But a lot of us had to jump in and provide for them, my family, my parents specifically. And at that time, you really cannot take risks because now you have a responsibility. So I would love to learn about how you navigated through that time. Was it easy? And did you get the opportunity to break free while you were in that dynamic?
Navigating it was always kind of dipping one toe in the water, but never letting go of the safety net. So I
Hmm.
remember after being convinced to go to college, I'm going to use the word convinced to put it nicely. Um, a friend of mine and I, someone who shared kind of the same ambitious, like, I don't want to do this. I want to set out and do my own thing. We started a real estate investment company in the beginning of college, and we were buying houses. This was prior to the whole financial collapse with no money, like you name it, we were doing it. But never quite able to leave school, never quite able to leave the jobs we were working. Because even though I'll speak for myself, forced to go to college, no one was paying for it. I picked the
Oh,
college that gave me the most scholarship money,
mm,
because that was the only way I could afford it. I made my schedule in such a way that all my courses were on 3 days. This way, I was able to work the other 4 days a week, a full time job to pay for college.
wow. You were going to college, which you didn't want to go to, paying for it from your pocket, managing so many things, juggling multiple things, and you were unhappy doing all of that?
Pretty much.
Oh, that sounds like a difficult situation. And in a way I can relate to you because when you're not following your path, everything seems difficult to do, you know? And when I hadn't started following my path, I remember even if I'm in the fanciest place in a very nice restaurant having dinner after my workday, I was miserable because I just didn't like what I was doing. And it didn't matter where you take me, how happy everybody else is around me. I just didn't feel happy because I knew that I'm taking away from my own potential and my own time. And rather than following what I really do want to follow, I'm just following everybody else.
Yeah, if you're anything like me, the beginning of those nice dinners or times out were always enjoyable, right? Because you've just forgotten
Yeah.
what you left. But as that night wears on or comes to an end, it suddenly all the joy gets sucked out because you start thinking about, oh, I got to wake up and do this all over again tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it continues. It continues to the point that you decide that, okay, I'm not going to have it anymore.
Yeah, it gets to the point where I know you and I have had this conversation about just how powerful the mind is, where you're physically making yourself sick because you're so unhappy with what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. That is actually really, really powerful, and I would love to talk about it a little bit more. Um, you're saying like physically making yourself sick just because you're unhappy with what you're doing. And then we think that our body is giving us signals that, okay, you're unhappy, make a change. And this is really interesting that you mentioned it and that you experienced it because a lot of the times we do not understand that we subconsciously are putting hurdles on our way because we are not happy in what we're doing. So we are in a way our conscious mind which wants to take the logical decision, which wants to do the safe thing, which always wants to make sure that nothing goes wrong and is following the safe path when the conscious mind just does what makes sense and the subconscious mind which knows that there is a way which is connected to our consciousness, it often gives us hints through gut feelings and intuition and thoughts. Did you experience something like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I knew, not that I've really ever been a morning person, but most mornings I couldn't get out of bed. Like, I had no desire to get out of bed. My body was telling me just stay in bed. Um, I maybe in my entire career called out legitimately sick 4 or 5 times. And toward the end, it was like almost every single day I was trying to find a reason to call out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That sounds familiar. Even though I'm not, I try to be a good corporate employee. That does sound familiar. It does come to a point where your internal struggle overtakes and you're not able to help it. And you're calling in sick or you're looking for excuses just to avoid that place.
when you said something interesting, that good corporate employee, right? When you finally realize that that is just a definition either we put on ourselves or that
Yeah.
we're conditioned to believe you need to be, because the company doesn't care about you. And I don't want to say there aren't companies out there who maybe are better than others, but for the most part, at the end of the day, any corporate job I've ever had that's, been a Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 company, they really don't care. They will tell you they care, but when it comes down to it, they do not.
They don't. It's true. And the reason I say this is because whoever is listening and they want to make a change and they're in their corporate job and they're thinking, what is my boss going to think? What are my colleagues going to think? Let me tell you this. When I left my position, I was very loved in my position, very celebrated, I would say. When I left, it took them 10 days to replace me. And I never got a call back from anybody, like just on Facebook, maybe once in a while. Hey, Sarah, that's it. Like, happy birthday. That's about it. No real conversation. And I'm talking about people that I have had to spend long conversations with, which were real. And so, only maybe a few, like the ones who are in my neighborhood, those are the ones that I see regularly. But other than that, the people at work who I thought really celebrated me, they never looked back.
So this is something else you and I have spoken about, but the expression misery loves company is the truest example of that is in the corporate structure. Because I remember the exact
Mm-hmm.
same experiences you're talking about, colleagues who I worked with for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And we would all have the same complaints. We would all have the same issues. And when it came time to discussing what we would do, 90% of them, the answer was always, well, let's go look for another at this company. But it was always doing the same thing, just somewhere else. And that was
Mm-hmm.
always acceptable. But if you were the one in that conversation to be like, well, I'm thinking of starting my own business, then it was always like, oh, well, you can't do that. Like, why would you do that? That's crazy. And much like
Yeah.
you're doing everything. You're celebrated. You're hitting all of the company expectations, and then you resign. And these people who you were close to for 4, 5, 6 years, all of a sudden, now you're not miserable anymore, and they don't want to hang out with you.
Mm-hmm. How did you feel when people that were close to you or that you thought had really, cared for you, now they were all of a sudden, they were not interested in hanging out with you or having conversations with you? Did that make you question everything that you had with them?
So at first, it definitely did. I quickly realized there was no need to question. It just proved their true colors.
Mm-hmm.
And in almost every single case, I haven't lost a wink of sleep over it. My life is better off without them in it because they're still doing that miserable thing that I want nothing to do with.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is true. The true colors. For me, I get very interested when people say that I think you're a lot more composed or headstrong than me in that case, because it did hit me and I was very surprised when the people I thought were actually genuine and they were genuinely interested in my welfare. They were the ones who would, ask me, hey, Sarah, what are you doing? Have you started your business yet? Initially, they were like, why? That's not a good idea. But once I started, I just felt like I'm seeing a different side to them. And I don't know whether I should feel sorry for them because they haven't been able to break through, or whether I should just, cut them off and think that they were never good in the first place.
Yeah, I heard there's many ways this expression has been said. I'm just going to use the one that comes to my head first. If you want to understand your income or if you want to understand your potential, just look at your 10 closest associates.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you surround yourself with people who are just miserable, they're at the same place you're at in life and they don't desire anything greater, that's where you're going to get stuck.
That's true.
The best thing you can do is surround yourself with the people who are doing what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. That is true. So, Matthew, going back to the phrase that we were talking about, when the growth pain is less than the desire for change, and when you finally decide that, okay, I cannot have it anymore, let's talk about it a little bit more. That transition period.
What specifically? Because that's such an open topic. I don't want to go down the wrong road.
That's a Yeah, that's a very so I would, I would really love to know. I know that most of the times when people are making those big changes in life, it is a change in isolation. It is something that you're doing all by yourself. And that isolation period is painful. And what I have understood by hearing so many other stories is that the internal dialogue you have with yourself, the conversations you have with yourself, they can either build you up and allow you to have that breakthrough, or they can either elongate that transition period.
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to answer this kind of long windedly, but I think it's important. So looking back at the entire time I stayed stuck, I I had numerous, if not dozens of opportunities where leaving would have made more financial sense.
Hmm.
It would have been a smarter, safer move. I would have had a lot more peace of mind in doing it, but I just couldn't bring myself to take the risk. When I finally did it, I did. So what I mean by that is during those periods, I had no kids, I had no mortgage. So there was a whole lot less pressure if I
Hmm.
made a decision and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Okay, no harm, no foul. I could always go back with my tail between my legs. When I finally hit my breaking point, I had two kids, um, both at the like 5 and 1, a mortgage, car payments, school, you name it. Most people at that point would be like, "You're seriously out of your mind. Like you're going from a 6-figure job to a low 5-figure consulting gig
Hmm.
with a family to support."
Yeah.
And for me, I think really that gravity is what drove me forward to say, I can't accept failure. Like there is no going back. Because if I fail, everyone's screwed.
Yeah. You are carrying the weight of your entire family. And there is really no margin to play around. It has to work.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no like year of savings. It was kind of like, we're good for 30 days. I better figure this out pretty quick.
Wow.
But I realized not making that decision, I might not be here at all because like the job was that bad, like the physical stress. There were days that I actually would take my lunch break and drink in my car before going back in just to get myself through the next 4 or 6 hours.
Wow. This is so powerful. So it's like you really couldn't take it anymore, any longer. And despite having,
No,
yeah,
I was doing everything in my power, including self medicating, just to try to continue doing it.
self medicating, wow. Yeah, that's just, it's how much you were internally and in your mind rejecting your current circumstances, and we're not ready to carry on before making that change. I'm just, still processing how you had two kids, your wife, everybody to support, and you only were sure about the next 30 days. That is still is in my head. How did that go?
There was a conversation because clearly that's not a decision I'd want to make unilaterally, but there was no mystery to anyone how
Mhm.
unhappy I was. It was really affecting everything to such a
Yeah.
negative extent that I think everyone, even my parents, my mother was already passed away, but even my father at that point kind of understood that not taking that risk and making that change, I was going to lose everything anyway.
Mhm.
The only question was going to be whose terms is it on?
I'm slightly moved here because it's, when you say that everybody around you could see how miserable it was making you and that you were going to lose everything anyway. And, just giving it a shot, maybe a chance for you to redeem yourself and redeem your life. And that must have been a massive decision for the entire family.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely was. I have to be incredibly thankful for the support that I got to do it because if I didn't, I mean, who knows where I'd be right now?
Hmm. I would love to, transform into Matthew's mind, the one who is making that transition and, talking to the family and telling himself that I can do it. You obviously weren't even sure yourself because you just had a couple. I remember you mentioning that you had some consulting gigs, and that's about it, right? There was no path paved. How did you maneuver through that?
I looked at it as an opportunity to try to get back to figuring out what I wanted to do. So the consulting gigs that I took
Mm-hmm.
just covered, I think, the mortgage and maybe a car payment. So at least I knew no one would be homeless if I kept doing that. And the extra time that I got back allowed me to
Yeah.
really sit down, immerse myself back in my writing, think about some other things that I wanted to do. So outside of Pen for Hire, like while all of this was going on, I've always been interested in real estate. So I went and got my real estate license. Um, Strictly for the sake of saying I did it. Next thing I know, people started saying, "Oh, you got your real estate license. Can you help me buy this? Can you help me sell that?"
Mm-hmm.
So I started making money I never planned on making just because I took the step to get the license.
Mm-hmm.
So that money started helping alleviate some of the stress, and I was really able to get more clarity. And then there was that moment of panic, right? Because now that's going on. The pandemic happens, shuts down my consulting gig, also put a major roadblock in real estate operations in New York because people weren't opening their homes. It was just so now it's like, oh wait, we're back here again. And that's when I met the gentleman who needed the book. And the
Mm.
universe, it was almost like the universe every single time I got hit in the face was like, don't quit.
Mm. The story came full circle just right there.
And to bring it back to mindset, I tend to wonder if, the universe is nothing more than my mindset saying this has to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you really believe there are other opportunities and there's things you can do, they'll present themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And, I really like how you mentioned that the universe is, just, it can be just my mindset. Um, a part of this statement is quite relatable, and a part of it just leads to some mysticism, like how is the universe functioning? If I decide to make a change, how much does it help me? And saying how you were mentioning everything fell in place, you met the gentleman, and then you started your career as a ghostwriter, and that was a precursor to several positive events in your life, and we'll get to that. But how the gentleman came into your life and how everything played out, you got your real estate license. It seems like things were actually paved out for you, whether you knew about them or not. You just had to really decide to walk on that path.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you were saying something?
Oh, you and I had this conversation when we first met, that interconnectedness. Again, it's something that you hear a lot about. There are tons of books on it. There's
Mm-hmm.
science on it. And when you're not benefiting from it, and maybe benefiting is not the right word, but when you're not actually experiencing it,
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy to be like, oh, it's all BS. But once you change your mindset and realize, like, wait a minute, there's plenty of people out there doing this or doing better things, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do people create what they create? It's not because they're smarter. It's not because they have more money. I mean, maybe sometimes it is. But for the most part, it's because they've committed to doing it and they know why they're doing it.
Yes, 100%. It is not because they're smarter. Because that is what I thought myself. I thought people who are able to break free or have probably, they just have all those skills. But when I hear entrepreneurs talk, when I hear people who have made the massive changes talk, can be Oscar winners, can be Olympians, people who have made it big. It just seems like there are regular people who have decided to make it big. And then they put in the effort and the universe does its work.
Yeah, they would not accept failure as an option. And you hit it on the head. They put in the work.
They put in the work.
That's a lot of people want to say, well, how come they got it and I didn't?
Mhm.
Well, that person spent 80 hours a week building their vision. You spent 8 minutes before bed, or you spoke to your friend about it and then you never did anything with it. That's
Yeah.
why it didn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting, Matthew, in this is when we were talking about how the universe plays a role, and I read about it a lot. I research into this all the time. And so I'm always, still today, having read hundreds of stories, I'm still always so fascinated when I hear a new story and they say, oh, this worked out this way. I didn't expect the source of income to start here. I didn't expect this person to pop up from out of nowhere. He offered help and things worked out. And it really makes me wonder, this interconnectedness that we are a part of, and a very interactive component of this interconnectedness. If we are not aware that we are in this interconnectedness, we may never be able to use any of the possibilities that it offers, living a passive life.
Yeah. Funny you say that. I met a gentleman yesterday
Yeah.
who he's a Marine veteran, and he started this entire platform, works heavily with veterans. Hopefully, we're going to do some great work together helping them tell their stories. But I was visiting this community site that he built just to get some background. And there's a video on there from one of the entrepreneurs who lost his life savings like 3 or 4 times investing in the stock market. He was driving an Uber and decided to not give up, like knew he could make money with investing. He had just gotten some bad breaks and now he's a millionaire.
Wow.
All from not quitting on investing.
Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful. A millionaire. What else can you ask for, right? If you make the right investment, there you go.
And I mean, he's actively doing it, right? So it's not, I love this saying, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up.
It truly is. It truly is. And those are like the golden words. And when you start, following that path for you, it truly feels like it's not about how many failures you have, but what are you doing about those failures? How are you getting up? Are you even getting up? Or are you ready to quit? Because it seems like the universe tests you a lot of times before it gives you what you really want.
And are you learning from those mistakes? Because there is a fine line between dedication and stupidity, right? If you get knocked down 50 times and you get up and keep making the same mistake, all right, that's maybe a different conversation. But at least if you're learning something each time, and each time you get knocked down isn't for the exact same reason, I think that's really where the prize is.
Yeah, that's like where the heart of, all of this is, this transition. A situation will keep repeating itself unless and until you learn your lesson, and that's only when it's going to leave you. So that's a lesson for me. Sometimes I need to remind myself, obviously, like going through being an entrepreneur, just building something from the ground up. There's so many challenges that come in the way. There's so many learnings. And I keep reminding myself, I just have to keep going. If I've had 5 things which didn't work out as expected, but 2 things which did, I'll be focused on the ones that did work out and keep moving. That's the role I'm playing, to trust in the process and to keep moving even when things get difficult.
Yeah, you can constantly lament everything that didn't go your way, but the one thing that does could be more positive than the 4 that didn't.
Yeah, 100%. So now you have your own business, Pen for Hire. And from what I see and from what I know about you, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to define what well is, but compared to where I was at, if you would have told me 5 years ago that I would have clients with PhDs paying me to write their story, that I would have folks like John David Mann, who wrote The Go-Giver, on my podcast 3 different times for 3 different books, I would have thought you were crazy. I'm like, why would they want to talk to me? Why would they want to pay me? And now, I mean, I guess I look at that and it's really humbling that I could have been doing this all along, or maybe I just needed to get to that point in order to truly appreciate the opportunity to do it.
100%. 100%. So now how is your nervous system, Matthew? Now, how does it feel like waking up every day in the morning?
So I'm not going to pretend like there's no stress and that life is just great because you're doing what you want. But it's definitely an entirely different feeling because every day that I get out of bed, I know, 1, I am in complete control of how my day goes. 2, there are people who genuinely are counting on me to get done what I said I was going to get done, and not just because it's going to their $1 trillion bottom line. Like, these are people who are also looking to follow their passion and make positive changes in the world. And that sense of responsibility gives me the fuel. Whereas the other sense of responsibility, like if I don't show up, the bank can't open today. Well, I don't really care. That's not my problem. Now, like if I don't show up, this client's not going to get their book done. If their book's not going to get done, they're not going to have it for the event they're speaking at. The 100 people in attendance might not get to take their message home with them. That really changes my perception on why I do what I do.
Yeah. There is just, so you're saying that it could be that you wake up and you still have stresses, but the kind of stress is very different. It's not, you're not dragging yourself into it. You have a good kind of a stress in a way that it propels you to do more.
Yeah. I mean, there's
Yeah.
always the stresses of being an entrepreneur. There's always that question of, oh, it's the end of the month. Am I going to make payroll? Or, you got the two clients didn't pay. Like, what do I do? So there's always
It's
that
so
there,
true.
right? Whereas in the
Yeah.
other job, the paycheck's always there every other Thursday. But,
Yeah.
it's so much easier to deal with that stress now, knowing that the rest of my day is going to go how I plan for the most part.
Yeah. So despite having those challenges where you're like, okay, the paycheck is not secure, I still need to be making, for example, $10,000 more to make sure that everything is running smoothly, the engine of the business is running smoothly, and so on. However, it doesn't seem like a drag. It still seems like a good challenge that you're up for.
Yeah. And as long as I remain positive and believe that everything's going to work out, I can't tell you how many times I've started going down the negative mindset of, I sent out 3 proposals today. No one replied, or they all said no. And then out of nowhere, someone I spoke to like 9 months ago and sent a proposal to will just reach out of nowhere and say, hey, do you have availability? I want to get this project started and pay you in full. Okay, yes,
Wow.
let's do that.
Yeah. Wow. So, I think a lot of people who are listening would then, think about this in a way that it does take a point where you're ready to make a change. And that point is critical. That's when you finally say that, okay, I cannot keep doing what I'm doing if it's not serving me, if it's not serving my higher purpose. I have to make that transition. And while you're in that new life, your transitioned life, you are still going to be experiencing some challenges and will be growing with that challenges. The version of you who's earning, let's say, $1 million is not the same version of you right now. There is growth required. And so you will be, I think we're put in situations where we have to grow and become mentally agile and mentally strong enough to stay and grow in that transition period and finally become the person who's now also earning well and earning $1 million or whatever milestones you set for yourself.
Yeah, and that's something even now recently, just this year, that became clearer for me. Working with a coach and a consultant, there's always this push for what you want to achieve, goal setting. And for them, a lot of those goals are always like we're conditioned for them to be financial goals, right? I want to hit certain amount of money in revenue, or I want the business to be worth this. When in reality, that should come as a product of achieving what's meaningful to you. I feel like when I'm not chasing
Yeah.
money, things are much easier. Would $1 million be nice? Sure. But for the reason that then I'd have more time to do more of the things that I wish I could do, like volunteer with veterans and help them tell their stories without having to charge them what I know they can't necessarily afford to pay. Not taking on clients that I know I'm not going to enjoy working with because I need to pay my mortgage. So money is a necessary evil in life, but there does come a point where, why do I need $10 million? What am I going to do with $10 million? My kids will be just fine with much less.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And, not losing focus is like the main thing. Like you can be earning much more money, but what is it doing to you? It's still going to be working as a tool to give you more time to still keep fulfilling your purpose.
Yeah. Too many times I see it myself with some of my clients. The money becomes the sole purpose, right? So it's no longer doing what you wanted it for, right? It's not providing you the freedom. You've made enough to have that freedom, but now you're addicted to making it, and your sole purpose becomes making more of it.
Yeah.
Right. And then you hear these stories of people who like had everything taken away from them. And they were so addicted to the lifestyle that they just don't know what to do with themselves now that it's gone.
Yeah, that is true. I see that very often. I think it's now become a culture. The more you earn, the more, hyped it is on social media. It's seen as a metric for success. And in a way, it is a metric for success if you're doing well financially, but it is not a goal. to me that I would want to achieve in terms of fulfilling my purpose.
Yeah.
I'd still look at it as a tool.
It is a tool. And even as a metric, it's not always the most accurate metric, right? Because the person you're idolizing on social media who made all of this money, how did they make it, right? Did they make it in a way that was aligned with their vision and purpose? Or did they make, borrow, steal, con people, right? You read about it all the time. Influencers who are asking for free meals so they can put it on there. You're making your money off of somebody else instead of with somebody else.
Yeah. Ethically or unethically.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a lot these days. I think it's something that, a lot of people, like when I go on social media, there are a lot of people right now who want to offer advice and suggestions and consulting because they say that they have made so much money doing that themselves. And I see a lot of, pitfalls for people who are buying those stories because they're not always accurate.
Yeah. I mean, every day you log onto your social media, there's someone else selling a course or a coaching of, you can be like me. You know what? If you really made that much money and you're really that fulfilled, why are you selling a Facebook course for $37?
That is true. That is true. Very well put.
Right? If your plan is to give back, make it available for free. Tell the whole world how to do it.
100%.
But, you're this billionaire and here you are hawking a $37 course. I don't know. I have questions.
That is so true. I like how you playfully mentioned something that is so critical over here, Matthew. I'm sure a lot of people got the hint that, oh yeah, I never really thought about it that way. I love how, yeah.
I was just going to say, do some homework, people. Don't just believe what people are selling you.
Yeah, 100%. And I just want to underscore how valuable things that you have said today are for me as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure are for other people, because you have really prioritized things which matter. And that is working with intention, is staying true to your purpose, understanding that money is a tool, understanding that this is a journey with challenges and you will have growth pains in your new path, even though it's in an alignment with your soul. You will have stresses, but they're not the kind of stresses which will propel you backwards. And it's important to have a positive mindset so you don't go back spiraling down.
Yep, absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matthew.
It's been my pleasure, Sarah.
So Matthew, where can people find you if they want to contact you and avail the services of Pen for Hire?
Absolutely. Best place would be the website, Penforhirenyc. That's as in NewYorkCity.com. There's a booking link there. Everyone can book for a free 30-minute consultation where we can talk about whatever their potential project might be. You can email me directly, Matt, M-A-T-T, at penforhirenyc.com. Social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all Pen for Hire NYC, I believe, or just Pen for Hire, but everything's pretty much uniform. So if you're looking for Pen for Hire, you'll find us. Logo is the icon for everything.
Perfect. We'll have all the details below for Matthew. If you want to reach out, please feel free to do that. And yeah, a big congrats to Matthew for what he's doing. It's making a massive difference. And I'm sure you're going to keep getting, those hints from the universe that you're on the right path.
Yeah, I truly never even connected the dots until I met you. So I'm going to end this by saying you're like another one of those hints from the universe that I'm on the right path.
That is so sweet, Matthew. That is so sweet. I'm happy I played a role.
Thank you.